Town Hall. Okay, thanks, Paul. Sorry about that. I do have to take care of a couple administrative issues before we get started. So first off, I'm going to read the governor's proclamation, which we've been instructed to do before every city meeting. So forgive me while I read this. It says on Friday, March 4th, 2022, the governor signed a new disaster proclamation extending the statewide declaration through Saturday, April 2nd, 2022. With the signing of this new disaster proclamation, public meetings may continue to be held remotely, subject to the requirements of Public Act 101-0640. 1, standard 48-hour notice, except for an emergency meeting, to all members of the public body, posted at the meeting location on the public body's website and provided to any news media that has requested in advance. The notice agenda must include the remote access information on it, and the agenda must state if in-person attendance is allowed at any remote hybrid meeting. 2, during the meeting, participating members must be verified and must be able to hear one another, as well as hear all discussion and testimony. 3, during open meetings, members of the public who are present at the meeting location of the public body must be able to hear all discussion, testimony, and votes of the members of the body. 4, if attendance at the regular meeting location is not feasible due to the disaster, alternative arrangements must be made, and notice of the meeting must include the arrangements that will provide live public access to hear all parts of the open meeting, phone number, link to Zoom, etc. 5, at least one member of the public body, the chief legal counsel, or the chief administrative officer must be physically present at the meeting location unless it is not feasible due to the disaster. Other members of the public body may attend in person or remotely. 6, all votes must be by roll call, identifying each member and recording their vote on each issue. 7, standard minutes of all meetings must be kept, approved, and made available for public review as usual. And 8, a verbatim audio or video recording of all meetings must be made and available to the public review. These recordings are public records and must be pertained per the Open Meetings Act. Okay, so that tells you all why we're meeting on Zoom and not in person. I think second, what we're going to do is call the roll for the committee. We are the Peoria Police Community Relations Advisory Committee. And what I'm going to do is call the roll. And when I do, I'll state which district each member represents. And I will, when I call your name, go ahead and introduce yourself to the public, because this is a little bit different than a regular meeting. This is a town hall. So I think any members of the public might want to know who you are and who you represent. So I'll start with Council Member Andre Allen, who represents the City Council. So Andre, I see.
Present.
Anything you want to tell the public here?
Welcome and thank you for participating tonight. And thank you, Chairwoman Zagardo and Vice Chair Allison Galvin, for y'all leadership and the rest of the committee. This is great. And shout out to the panelists as well too tonight. We're very excited to have you.
Thanks, Andre. Chief Demario Boone represents District 150.
Yep, that's me. Chief Demario Boone represents Peoria Public Schools, District 150.
Thanks, Chief. Shalandra Birch is an at-large member of the committee.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Terry Burnside is an at-large member of the committee.
Hello, good evening all, and welcome to this forum.
Thanks, Terry. Chief Echeverria. Let's see, do I see Chief? I don't see Chief. We'll circle back if, I'm not sure I see everybody on my screen. It's getting kind of crowded, which is nice. If I miss you, please let me know. Kevin Evans represents the city manager's office. Allison Galvin is our under 25 representative.
Hi, everyone. I'm present, Janice. Thanks for coming. I'm the under 25 and also vice chair for the committee.
Yes, thank you, Allison. Let's see. Chanel Hargrave Murray represents the 4th district. Chanel in attendance. Donald Jackson represents the NAACP, and he's told me he's not available tonight. Lorraine King represents the 3rd District. Lee Lang represents the 2nd District.
I'm present, Janice, representing the 2nd District.
Thanks, Lee. Tyson Parks the 3rd is an at-large member. Catherine Scheidley represents the 1st District.
Hi. I'm First District, as Janice said.
Catherine's here. Thanks, Catherine. You say Dan on your screen.
I'm sorry, I'll have to
Stole
change
your,
that later
stole
on.
your husband's iPod, huh? iPad.
He set it up for me.
Alex Sierra is an under 25 representative. Karen Wilson at large. And I am Janice Sagardo. I'm an at-large representative. So we have a quorum. So thank you to the committee members who showed up. I'm going to read you a very, very brief ground rules for the town hall. First, each citizen who wants to speak will have up to 5 minutes after you raise your hand in your little emoji via the Zoom. If there are multiple people with their hand raised, we're going to do our best to call them in order. I think Paul just raised his hand to show everybody how to do it. Either that or he wants to speak. Every person will be muted until they are called on to speak by the moderator, just to kind of minimize confusion. When you do speak, please state your name and turn your camera on so we can relate to you. And please be respectful at all times. So we're really pleased to put this panel together. This is going to be a discussion of public health and youth resources. Our committee member, Shalandra Birch, has volunteered to moderate the panel for us because this is her field of interest and expertise. Shalandra currently works at the Illinois Department of Corrections as a public service administrator. In this role, Shalandra is responsible for the research and development of evidence-based programs for individuals in custody. Evidence-based programs are tested and translated into practical community models. One successful example is the implementation of day reporting centers for youths. This program significantly reduced statewide recidivism rates. Rather than returning youths to state custody, they work on services with community service providers. The programs are subject to data collection requirements, critical review, evaluation, and research to determine their effectiveness. Previously, Shalandra worked at the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice as a statewide warrant officer and intensive supervision coordinator for youth in custody. Shalandra holds a bachelor's degree in sociology, a master's in counseling, and she is working on a doctorate in public policy and administration. So at this point in time, I'm going to invite Shalandra to talk about the ground rules that she has established with the panelists, introduce them, allow them to introduce their programs. And what we're going to do is let each of the panel members present information about their programs prompted by Shalandra's questions. And at the very end, we will invite questions from the community members. So I'm going to head and mute myself. And Shalandra, thank you so much for taking on this moderator role for us.
Thank you so much. So the way we're going to do this is try to make it as organized as possible. Each panel member will get a brief 1-minute introduction, and then they'll get 3 minutes on each question before we move on to the next. Each panel member has 3 questions except for Mr. Booth, who has 4. So we will start with Mr. Burnside, then we will move on to Mr. Booth, then we will go to Chief Boone and end with Dr. Knight. And once we complete Dr. Knight, that's when we can have our question and answer session. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and get started. Terry Burnside is a consistent advocate for anti-violence since the year 2007, when he started working with the original frontline staff. Mr. Burnside is familiar with the Peoria community and the resources necessary for change. Mr. Burnside is the president and executive director of House of Hope in Peoria, Illinois. And we are excited to have him present today, not only as a panel member, but also as a committee member for our current board. How are you, Mr. Burnside?
Good evening. How are you, ma'am?
I'm good. So your first question, can you tell us some of the things you have going on at the House of Hope, specifically programs and services available for youth in the community?
Yes, ma'am. In 2007, I realized that our youth needed guidance and support, which is why I used cards as a way to attract them, to build rapport, and provide that mentorship to the fatherless. I conducted a research within multiple cities across the country, and I learned more about violence intervention and prevention programs, such as Ceasefire, Cure Violence, go back to 2002, like 2009. And I realized that my current mentoring approach, age, and population needed to be adjusted. We are currently utilizing their model by adding a clinical mental health lens. Their model is broken down utilizing interrupter transmission, which will be our outreach and credible messengers and youth mentee program. The next step is like changing the violent thinking patterns, which we are using in our nonviolence and victim support program. And lastly, we are changing our community norms by utilizing other clinical approaches than the standard SEL and CBT, and by providing additional resources and programs such as workforce development, reentry, and case management, which provide resources, on-site food pantry that is open every Friday, cooking class, a medical doctor to do check vitals on those occasions, educate community on COVID and the effect food has on our lives. And lastly, I'd just like to say that we also had a successful victims compensation event this past Saturday, which we will host every month, and a survivor speak event on the 30th of this month in Springfield, which my clinical staff will be in attendance for the entire evening event, providing clinical mental health support to all of the survivors who are become triggered. Since our grand opening, anyone who has lost a family or friend or loved one to violence, we have been able to host a repast at our building for free of charge. This is also promoted a monthly support groups for youth and adults.
Wow, thank you for that.
Welcome.
Can you talk about how you empower the youth in the community at the House of Hope?
Yep, through like our outreach program. It will focus on mentoring at-risk youth, more like the lost population, by providing mentorship, counseling through our clinicians, and providing opportunities through jobs, which I am working with my team on a summer curriculums, which will also provide incentives and mentorship, counseling, knowledge, and budgeting, and financial early literacy.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things the community can do to help you at the House of Hope?
Just at the House of Hope, we need the volunteers. We do a lot in the community to help people out. We understand we need the volunteers to help us with multiple tasks at our building, and collaborations from other organizations who are getting a lot of the resources to do some of the things that we are doing, which is why I'm having a partnership brunch this Saturday. Our community need help, and I just need help to help them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Burnside.
Well,
next, we will move on to Mr. Derek Booth. Mr. Derek Booth is the Director of Social Emotional Learning for Peoria Public Schools District 150. In this role, Mr. Booth oversees the Wraparound Center in Peoria, Illinois, which is a one-stop shop for community resources and support. Hello, Mr. Booth, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me be a part of this panel today. Appreciate being here.
You're welcome, and thank you for participating and taking time out of your day. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So your first question is, can you speak about programs and services that are youth focused to address community violence that are available at the Wraparound Center?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Wraparound Center is a host of social service agencies, supports resources, and also additional basic needs that not only uh, for our youth, but also for our families, which ultimately we feel support our youth, not only in Peoria Public Schools, but throughout the community. Some of the resources that are here are OSF Strive, which is they provide a trauma recovery program to work with individuals who are victims of violence. And that could be the immediate victim themselves of any type of violent crime, whether it be abuse, sexual abuse, gunfire, domestic violence, or it could be individuals that are a witness to that violence, or an individual that may live in the home of someone else that's a victim of that, because we know that still impacts the individuals in the home as well. We also have Family Core here. Family Core has a respite program for students that are not successful in their home school. They can stay here for short-term stays of up to 3 days. Family Core also has a single parent program for mothers that are single mothers to offer them resources and services and supports to help them. And then they also offer anger management classes here at the Wraparound Center. We've been able to expand those services not only for court-appointed students, but also the general students that, without being court-appointed, they can take advantage of anger management supports. Jobs Partnership provides services here. They currently have a solar panel training with about 20 individuals, training individuals in solar panel installation. They go through a 16-week program. They do 12 of those weeks here, and they do another 4 weeks at Illinois Central College. And at the conclusion of that program, those individuals that complete will receive a certification, and they'll be placed on job sites. And one of the things that we look at is the majority of those individuals that are going through that training, their students are Peoria Public School students. And so that's a way we feel like if we can help the parents obtain living wage jobs, we're ultimately also helping our students that we serve every day. Hand Up Food Pantry is located here. That is ran by Ms. Pam Wiley. And she does a food pantry distribution throughout the week if anyone needs food. But she also has a lot of basic need resources, diaper giveaways. Thursdays is her primary distribution day, but literally individuals can stop down anytime that we're open, and we'll be happy to prepare a food basket for them. Chestnut provides substance abuse services here, not only for our students, but also for individuals in the community. They also provide mental health supports and therapeutic services for not only our students, but the community as a whole. Attorney Yolanda Riley does free legal services for individuals in the community. The legal services that she provides are around family law, custody, child support, orders of protection, expungement sealing, landlord-tenant negotiations, pretty much anything non-criminal legal services that individual need. We also have juvenile probation that utilizes space here in conjunction with our justice advocates that provide services to students that are going through the criminal justice system. So those are some of the supports that we have right here at the Wraparound Center to provide services, like I said, not only for our Peoria public school students and families, but throughout the Peoria community.
Thank you for that. That sounds amazing. And it's definitely a one-stop shop, like you mentioned. The next question, is there more than one Wraparound Center in the Peoria community?
There's other agencies, organizations that provide multiple services, similar type of services, but this plethora of services and the type of collaboration, there's not this many type of services that you'll find under one roof, not only in Peoria, but throughout the state of Illinois. This model of the Wraparound Center is being duplicated in various other cities throughout the state. East St. Louis has duplicated this model, still not on this scale yet, but I'm a consultant for the Wraparound Center in East St. Louis. And then there's also a Wraparound Center outside of Chicago, Illinois, that's being implemented that I'm also consulting with as well. But this scale of services under one roof is the first of its kind in the state.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that. You kind of spoke on this already, but can you tell us more about the food pantry? Is there a limit to it? Can people just come and kind of get what they need? Or can you talk a little bit more about the food pantry? I'm really interested in that.
Absolutely, and I'm glad. Thank you for asking that, because I consider our food pantry our anchor institution here at the Wraparound Center. One of the things that we find when we have mental health services, substance abuse services, those are not services where if you build it, they will automatically come. But what I did find through opening the doors of the Wraparound Center, the food pantry is a service that meets the basic needs of individuals. And on Thursdays, you'll see a line of cars lined up all the way down throughout the parking lot down the street. And those individuals come week after week for those basic needs. But what I also find, this is an opportunity for the Wraparound Center and some of the staff and professionals at the Wraparound Center to build relationships with those individuals. And through that building of trust and building of relationships, those individuals they start coming for food, but they also start asking for the other services. Can you help me with my son? Can you help me with housing? Can you help me with some of my legal needs that I'm going through? And then those individuals that we've turned our food pantry into a drive-through service right now they're starting coming in and getting access to some of the services that we also offer as well. And so the food pantry is what I have always referred to at the Wraparound Center as our anchor institution.
I'm glad to hear about that and that service is available in that portion of the community where they consider it to be a food desert. I'm really glad to hear about that. Is there anything you think that the community could do to help the Wraparound Center?
Yeah, Wraparound Center serves a lot of individuals, but we would always like to serve more. So anything you can do to continue to get the word out. And what I tell individuals, like if you or individuals that you know need anything and you don't know where to go, to send them to the Wraparound Center and we'll connect them with services. Even if we don't provide that service here at the Wraparound Center, through the different partnerships that we have, caseworkers that provide services here, they know how to find what individuals need. No one here, I use the example all the time, makes beds here at the Wraparound Center. But when we get a request for beds, we know how to put our heads together and meet that need and get that individual and that client the bed that they need. So as often as you can get the word out and have individuals come to provide any support services or resources that they need, we'll be happy for you to do that.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Making myself a note of a question I want to ask later when it's time for Q&A. All right, our next panel member is Chief Boone. Chief Boone manages the daily operations of the Peoria Public Schools District 150 School Safety Department. His primary role is to create a safe and positive school environment for all youth. Chief Boone is also responsible for the supervision of campus safety offers throughout the school district. He is also a standing committee member of this committee, the Peoria Advisory Committee on Police and Community Relations. Hello, Chief Boone, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay, your first question is, how do you address social media issues or things that happen with students outside of the school that might flow into the school later?
Yeah, that's a good question. Our department has 27 officers that are spread out through the district, and their primary focus, is to keep students, staff, and property safe. But not only that, to follow through with interventions. And with those interventions, we get a lot of social media issues with those. So the officers, they'll actually go to homes, they'll talk to parents, they'll mentor and counsel students. We work hand in hand with, the counselors that are in the building, counselors that are under, Coach Booth Wraparound, to try to diagnose solutions to those issues. We've seen a big rise in those types of issues with social media, and, we got several officers that are very tech savvy, monitoring Facebook. Kids are, so comfortable with officers that they share Facebook or social media issues. We're able to head them off before they get into the school doors. So really our role with school safety is it's not just the traditional safety aspect, but it's more interventions and try to be preventative.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question, can you give us a brief summary of the Lights on Peoria program? I heard about it, but I'm not really familiar with it, and I would like to learn more about that program.
Absolutely. The Lights on Peoria program, I actually stole the concept from another state, so I can't take full credit for everything. I'm really good at borrowing things and retooling. But there was a principal named Akbar Cook that started a Lights On program in his school because he had issues with juveniles, in the area that every year that he was principal, he was having to bury a child. And it was during certain peak crime hours. And he figured, if I just can get the kids to come inside the school building, it's a safe place, put, caring adults around them, we can help the issue. And when he did that, he saw, a huge decline in juvenile crime, literally around the school area where they were reporting no violent crimes or anything like that from juveniles in the area. And then he also hadn't lost any children the first 5 years that they had the program from his school. So when I saw this, I figured, Peoria can do this, we can duplicate it. Dr. Susan Gerznich helped, craft the grant to help get this here in Peoria. And with Lights on Peoria, we basically did what Akbar Cook did. We wanted to try to keep a captive audience of kids during high peak crime hours. So we'll have kids around 6 all the way until 10 o'clock at night. We make sure that they're fed. And some days, we had video games there. We have Xbox, PlayStation. There's a lot of kids that I beat in Madden and 2K. They thought they were that good, but they weren't. But we'll just play video games with them, chess, checkers, and some kids just want a gym to play in all night long. So there's some kids that would just bring clothes and they would hoop all night long. And we got a captive audience until, 10 o'clock. Again, we feed them and then we don't just send them home and have them walk home at 10 o'clock at night. They are literally bused to their front door. So it's just trying to keep them in a safe place, in a safe environment. And when we take surveys with kids after it, one of the best things I heard in the survey was, why isn't this longer? We want this longer and we want this to keep going. So the program not only does the weekend program, but we were able to put washer and dryers inside of Peoria High and Manual. So when kids come to school, they can discreetly talk to people at Peoria High and Manual and say, hey, I need to use the washers and dryers. And sure enough, those people will get their clothes clean and they're going home with clean clothes. And then we have guest speakers that we sprinkle in throughout the weekends also for the kids to get something else on their minds. So the Lights On program is just really a program to just try to keep them safe and expose them to a lot of things. And then also this past weekend, Saturday, I just left with the kids and we went to Chicago to the Museum of Science and Industry Museum. So they have trips like that. We did a little paint and sip with them at Nikki and Jonathan Romaine's center there for Christmas. So it's just really exposing them and putting them in front of a lot of caring adults.
Thank you for that. That sounds like an amazing program and a good work for the community. So thank you for that. I know for sure I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure we all appreciate that. So thank you. What are some things that you think the community can do to better support school safety?
With school safety, it really starts at home. If there are parents that do need help with students, things like that, just like Coach Booth said, we have that wraparound center. If there's any need, reach out. We get parents all the time. I have parents in my inbox all the time, help me with my son, help me with my daughter, help me with this. I've contacted Mr. Burnside to come talk to students. We use an all hands on approach at that point, but it really starts at home with school safety to just, reach out if you need help and try to, have the students come to school with as least amount of trauma as possible. Because I know, Coach Booth can speak to it, but it's a lot harder to put that genie back in the bottle. And there's a lot of trauma at home, a lot of trauma on the streets, and then they're coming into the school building, and we're trying to fix that on top of teach them and educate them. It's a lot harder. So really just starting at home and asking for help if help is needed.
Thank you for that. We're moving along at a really good pace, so I thank everybody for that. Our last panel member is Dr. Leslie Knight. She is the Director of the Community Health Policy and Planning, and she currently works at the Peoria County Health Department. Hi, Dr. Knight, how are you?
Fine. It's actually Dr. McKnight.
Oh, well, I am so sorry.
That's okay.
And it says that right there.
It's all
Dr.
right.
McKnight. It's kind of funny though, because first I misplaced your number, and then this is not intentional. I think we might have to have a formal introduction to try it all over again.
You are
okay,
fine.
so Dr. McKnight.
Yes.
Can you talk about why gun violence is considered a public health crisis?
Absolutely. So in the United States, gun violence is the third leading cause of death for those 45 and under. Particularly the population of Black males, African-American males are 15 to 20 times more likely than white males to be shot or assaulted involving guns. Particularly for Peoria, because the health department, we actually do surveillance, is for surveillancing of gun violence because it has a mortality rate. And so we consider that just as the same, if it's a chronic disease and you die, death is the outcome. So with those types of outcomes, we monitor and surveillance. 80% of the gun violence cases are in the 61603, 04, 05 area code. The number of homicides have increased 150% since 2015. In 2015, there was 13 homicides in a year. Last year, there were 35. So, and about 80% of those that have passed from gun violence were African-American males. So here we have a targeted population, and we have a targeted geographical area where we need to concentrate and do our interventions. Because the injury and mortality rate, they're growing exponentially. So gun violence in Peoria is a public health crisis. So not only for the victims and the perpetrators, but there's residual effects of family members, community members, and the city as a whole. One being the level of trauma that's experienced in our community. And that's under that category of mental health that the other panelists have been speaking about. That includes everything from post-traumatic stress syndrome, anger, anxiety, depression, and unfortunately, it can lead to suicide. There's also, there's data that shows that it impacts adverse behaviors. So perpetuated violence, domestic violence, chronic diseases, behaviors such as smoking, drug and alcohol use. So again, gun violence has many, many impacts, and it affects families and individuals and the community overall wellness. So that, in essence, that has made this our Board of Health strategic priority.
Thank you for that, Dr. McKnight. Can you explain a little bit more what a strategic priority means?
Yes, so the strategic priority means that we are very intentional. The health department traditionally We have clinical services. So here at the health department, we have the WIC clinic, dental, and we have clinical services for things like STD, immunization. We also are, the responders to transmissible diseases. And so we've been, on the front lines with COVID. But given the increase of the negative facts in the injury and the deaths from gun violence, the Board of Health has says we need to be more intentional about helping the community build capacity to identify resources and also to continuously provide data to organizations to equip them and support them in their programming in the community. So that has been our role. We've been researching violence intervention models, and there was a mention of cure violence. I won't go into any detail of that nature, but just assisting Peoria and elected officials in coordinated efforts to have a community response, to have violence interruption strategies, and also bring in those that haven't been at the table, like our health systems, on them also providing resources to our community.
Thank you for that and explaining that. I appreciate the detail on that. Our next question for Dr. McKnight is, in a recent radio interview, you mentioned that community violence can have an economic effect on the community. Can you expand more on how violence can have an effect on the economy?
Absolutely. So prior to me working with the health department, I was with the city of Peoria for almost 20 years. In my last 8 years, I worked in economic development in the city manager's office. And so part of my job was to go out and attract businesses and bring them to Peoria for jobs and, contribute to our taxes and all of that. And they do their due diligence in communities before they make that business decision. And one of the key factors, almost number one, is public safety. So they want to ensure that their business will be safe, that the workers that they hire will be in a safe environment. They also are looking at the type of workers to make sure that they're productive, they're whole, they're healthy. So they come to our communities and they gather the data. They look on the news and see all of our stories, and then they drive around to our communities. And, we have borders where we say South Side, East Side, North Side, but no, in business, they look at the entire community as a whole. So I brought this up, the reason I brought this up is that although, I just opened up with that it's a targeted population, targeted area, gun violence impacts the entire city. The north side of the city will also be impacted by the increase of gun violence, because that is going to have an economic implication when we can't attract businesses to Peoria because they've looked at the data. So this is an all hands on deck. We're all, exposed to trauma as a result of this as well, just even processing what this means with gun violence in our streets and bloodshed. So again, this is not an isolated, there's complexity here, and it's going to take comprehensive solutions from all parties in order to reduce gun violence.
Thank you so much for that. And until I heard your radio brief snippet, I had no idea that those things were so closely related. And I appreciate you for explaining that and educating our community on something that might be overlooked. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is all of our specific questions that I have as a moderator for our panel members. I want to thank all 4 of our panel members for being available and for being present tonight. Your work in our community is much appreciated, and your availability to come to our town hall today is much appreciated. Dr. Zagardo?
Yeah, thank you, Shalandra. You did a great job organizing the questions and the bios for the panelists. And thank you to each and every one of the panelists. Since I have the microphone, I'm just going to butt right in and start asking questions. I don't know, Paul, if we have any hands raised, if any, now would be the time for community members to raise your little hand emoji and we can ask the panelists more in-depth questions. I guess I'll start with the last first. Dr. McKnight, I'm really interested in this whole idea of gun violence as a public health issue. Could you mentioned that you're trying to organize resources to support community programming. Could you give us a couple specifics about which programming in the community is the most effective? And I like that Shalandra ended every single panelist questions with what can the community do to help your organization? So number one, what's the most effective bang for the buck sort of programming that you guys support, and also what can the community do to support the health department?
Yeah, so that is a loaded question. So I would not say, House of Hope is better than Chief Booth's, safety program. Like the data and the impact and the role models and, Derek and the Wraparound Center is all impactful. It all helps. And everybody has that same focus and passion and strategy. So what do we do when, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things? We get organized. And so I appreciate Mayor Ali because she has organized these social services and with the chief Echeverria and with the faith base. So there's like a cross-sector collective impact strategy that is in motion right now as we speak. And as I mentioned, the health systems and the health department, we are now all starting to come together at the table so that one, we can identify what community resources are in Peoria, how impactful are they, and then how can we start to coordinate and should we partner? So that dynamic, Dr. Zagardo, is happening right now. And all of us are on this, we're at the table, we're going after funding together as well. So there's some funding coming in through the state of Illinois, through State Representative Jihan Gordon Booth. She's leading some efforts in the R3 grant, the Reimagine Public Safety grant. There's also American Recovery money coming through the city that's being dedicated for violence prevention. So we are, we're not going to just choose one strategy or one model, but the evidence does show that with a comprehensive approach, you need to detect and interrupt conflict. And I think Terry alluded to that. You need to mobilize community resources, and Chief Boone and Derek, they're doing that. And then you also need a hospital response where you're providing that support to those victims of gun violence and, to the families. And that's where we see our health systems and our case managers coming in. So there's elements of all of that happening in our community right now as we speak. And the, faith-based group, there's a chaplain now, and they're coordinated, the moms are organized. So it's a lot of good activity. And, we do need to create a platform where we can start showcasing our work and our progress. So the health department, we are hoping that we could be on the front end of that as our strategic priority.
Thank you. Yeah, I do love the idea of collaboration. It seems like there's so many silos built up that it's nice to have an approach where there's collaboration and cooperation. Are there any hands up right now? Do any committee members have questions before I just keep butting in here? Because I love hearing about these programs. Our fellow committee members, anyone? You guys were very thorough in your conversations. Okay, I'll move on to my questions. Mr. Burnside, I really liked hearing about your programs. It's almost an A to Z approach with providing services. You did say what you need is, and you said you needed help, volunteers to help with multiple tasks. Can you be a little more specific about what types of things volunteers can do? You now have way more than 1 minute to elaborate. So I know everyone was trying to economize on time when they were answering their questions. So talk a little bit more about what the community can do to help. If we have friends that are interested in volunteering, what sorts of things would they be doing? And we can try to talk it up among our friend groups also. So Mr. Burnside, I think you're muted.
Okay, thank you for that
There we
question,
go.
Zagardo. One of the big things we need a lot of help in right now is then like with a food pantry. I mean, being in the heart of the hood on the south side, much like what the Wraparound Center is doing, providing with the food pantry, it's like we're understaffed. So we get a few different volunteers here and there to come, but nothing real consistent. So some days I have to take off of work just to go oversee it. We usually operate that on Fridays from like noon, 10 to noon, excuse me. And we're starting to get a huge influx of foot traffic now that the weather's broke. Even before the weather broke last year, before it got cold, we were very busy with that. And also just we got a gang of mentors, mostly males. We could use some females as well moving forward, and just some in-house stuff we use. We are pretty well staffed. A lot of things are volunteer until we get the ball rolling. We're just to the point now we have no really resources as far as grant funding, things of that nature. Everything is pretty much out of pocket based off what I generate from my other businesses. So just overall, just community support and just a huge collaboration piece. We have a partnership brunch this week where we've extended a lot of invitations to a lot of people personally, and also most of the people in the SNET group. So if anybody's schedule permit this week, we'll have just a partnership brunch just to welcome those collaborations and future endeavors and trying to help us volunteer with some things.
Thank you. You have your hands full.
Mm-hmm. And grant writing.
And what? I'm sorry?
Grant writing.
Grant writing. Do we have any
Yes.
grant writing specials? Yeah, that's what everybody needs. Councilman Allen, you have your hand up. And then I don't know who this name is, Jay Chiola, after Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Chair Member Zagardo. And any one of the panelists or each of you can hop in on this question, but what are the biggest barriers that you see when it comes to, we have these amazing resources at our disposal for our citizens, but we know that there's sometimes that invisible barrier to get people to either reach out for help or to access those resources. So if each of you want to just take 30 seconds or so, just maybe saying some of the barriers that you inherit that causes people not to take advantage of your resources.
Yeah, I'll give a response to that. There's two things that come to mind initially, Councilman Allen. One is transportation. Many individuals that are in need of services, transportation is a big barrier for them. And one of the things we try to do here is also accommodate with bus passes. Some of the caseworkers that provide services here that we partner with through Family Corps also are willing to provide transportation and to pick up individuals to do intakes and assessments. That's one barrier. The other barrier, I think, more is a societal issue, and it's the stigma. It's the stigma of getting supports for mental health, the stigma for getting supports of substance abuse. And I just think the more we can normalize that it's okay not to be okay, the better our society will be as a whole. But I think everyone can benefit from therapeutic services, mental health services, counseling services, just by needing someone to talk to, just so we can release and get things off of us. But I think that barrier to that is the stigma piece, the fear of being called crazy, or the fear of being called mentally ill, when in fact it's norm that all of us could really benefit from as well. But I would definitely see that as a societal barrier.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. Who's next? Okay, Mr. Boone, yes.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Coach there. A lot of the barriers was transportation at one point. And I think I can kind of echo what everybody's kind of alluded to as far as the silos. There's a lot of barriers because, sometimes some people will say, there aren't enough services, and then there are people that say there are just too many services, and there's too many different services, and they don't know who does what and who's better at what. And it's just trying to get these, get everybody out of silos. Because the secret to my success is I use everybody's sauce. So, there's a lot of times when I'm talking to a kid and I'm in uniform and I know they are not listening to me. So I'll call, Carl Holloway or Terry Burnside, hey, this kid is not going to listen to me. So I need your secret sauce, and they'll go and put whatever on it. Or, if there's a male mentor program on Monday and I have a parent saying, hey, I need a mentor program for more than that. One thing that Carl Holloway did is he found a bunch of people. They got male mentor Monday. There's a mentoring group on Tuesday. There's one on Wednesday. They're Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday now. So I think that's kind of the barriers. Everybody's trying to learn, which fruit to pick from. So just trying to get all of those services and get everybody on one page is kind of one of the barriers, I think.
So I would agree with everyone so far, and I won't repeat it. One thing I will add is that through COVID and our contact tracing, talking with families that were isolated, we found out a lot, that families are dealing with so many issues. They don't have food in the house, they have burner phones, they don't have transportation, and they're so vulnerable, but you would never know it, right? Because they don't talk about it. Also, there's so many members in our community that's dealing with chronic diseases, and cancer being one of the main ones, and they don't talk about it. So there's something about this is my business, I'll handle it. You can't tell me. We have to find a way to start building these relationships in our community. And the other part of that is that, we got to stop judging families and people oh, that's a bad child, and talk about them. But you may be seeing trauma play out, right? And Chief can attest to that. And so can Derek. So we have to put on that public health lens and not that societal judgment, they're bad, I'm good, therefore I'm good. But start seeing these indicators and these red flags and say, I'm going to intentionally make a connection. I'm going to invite them to Chief Boone's program or Terry Burnside's, support group, and I'll go with you. And so Derek and I, we just went through a mental health first aid training, and that's what it was all about, just doing those check-ins and having those conversations. So I will add that we need to start being more intentional about social connectedness.
Okay, and just briefly, I just say for the household, I guess one of our biggest hurdles and one of the larger barriers would just be undercapitalized, under-resourced in respect to funding and things of that nature. And the better than all, just joining hands and just breaking down the silo mentalities and just the collaborations. That's it.
That was a good question, Andre. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was waiting for the dollars to come up. I guess it all boils down to dollars, right? Most of the time. Okay, thank you for your answers. The next person is, I don't know how to pronounce this, Jay Chiola. Could you maybe turn your camera on and unmute and pronounce your name and introduce yourself?
I apologize for not having a camera. I just received a new computer this week. My screen does not have a camera. I'm Lieutenant James Chiola, Peoria Police Department. I'm the commander of the Special Investigations Division. One of the sections underneath Special Investigation is the Neighborhood Services Unit, which we have the neighborhood services officers. So I just wanted to chime in here. One of the things I heard, oh, by the way, Shalandra, how are you? I haven't seen you in a long time. Shalandra and I worked together when she was with the juvenile justice. One of the things that I keep hearing over and over again from every panelist, and Miss McKnight brought it up, I think very distinctly, is the family. And one of the things that we found purely by accident in 2015, when we were looking at the most violent offenders in Peoria County, we narrowed it down to 100 violent offenders. Of those violent offenders, 92 of them were from either they were victims of domestic battery or they were perpetrators of domestic battery somewhere in their history. And I think that says a lot about the public health aspect of looking at a public health, that we have to look at these family units and the trauma that domestic battery is causing in these units. And I think that's one of the areas where I would hope that we would move forward in. And I know a lot of the mentoring programs, I know DeMario does a lot of that in the schools. And I think it's very important that we look at the family units and trying to bolster those. Listen to Miss McKnight talk about having to go out and meet these families and the trauma inside the family and the health issues inside the family that leads to this domestic situations and this acting out by the juveniles. So I just wanted to bring that out, that we recognize that too as being an issue.
Well spoken.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Do any of the panelists want to address that specifically before we go to the next question?
I wanted to say hi back. It has been a while since I've seen you, and nice hearing from you.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, nothing to add. I would just echo his point is well taken. One of the first things I recognize in this position as Director of Social Emotional Learning, the first year was all hands on deck to help the students, to help the students, to help the students. But we quickly realized to really help the students, we also have to help the family. We also have to help the staff who work with the students. And so a lot of these students are living in households where their caretakers are impacted by trauma and traumatized. And so it has to be a holistic approach to work and provide supports for everyone. So Officer Chiola's point is well taken.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. King is next, and then Committee Member Allison Galvin after Committee Member King.
Hi, I just wanted to chime in on what Dr. McKnight said, and also the officer as well. For the past couple of weeks, I interviewed some young men about violence in Peoria, those who've been touched by it, I mean, personally, not close. And one of the things that was very sad that one young man said was that parents don't talk to their kids. He said they are not comfortable coming to them with issues because of the way they might be scolded. And he said, so they don't talk to them, so they have to find someone else to talk to. So we have to find a way to teach parents how to talk to kids without being judgmental and wanting to punish them, needlessly. Then I interviewed somebody else who said that a lot of kids seek other activities because they don't have that connection with family. Like one guy was a basketball coach, and he said that a lot of times he has to sit and investigate and talk about those things going on in the background before the kid can actually get down to sports. And so sports is an outlet for them to be part of something that's positive. And we're especially blessed and pure to have so many people like the coach and the officer and Derek Booth that that are engaged in dealing with social emotional issues. And so that's one thing that we all have to be more aware of so that we can help somebody. I know when I was subbing, kids would do things and I would have chats with them and they would tell me about other issues going on that they wouldn't tell anybody else, that were all impacting and making them act out adversely. So it's going to take the whole village.
Thanks for sharing that, Lorraine. Allison?
First, I'd like to say thank you to the panelists. Fantastic questions, Solandra. I mean, they were spot on with everything that, we need to hear. And one thing that I've heard from the youth when I'm in the community, I've heard, oh, I wish, our house and, was like safe because, they had mold in it. Same thing from the parents. A lot of the mental health had to do with, how they were struggling to kind of like keep up with the stuff that was happening in the house, whether like, they were having issues with, mold in the house, windows having to get boarded up, or the windows having to get wrapped up because they're old, not good insulation, a lot of issues about public housing. I'm not sure if any of you have also noticed that, and, what would be like a good strategic plan to, get better housing in Peoria. Because I mean, a lot of the time that's what we're having to find, and we're struggling because there's not that many houses to even look at anymore.
Yeah, I can start out on that one. And just so you know, that the health department, we have housing programs. We have a lead mitigation program, and we also have a healthy homes program where we do that mold mitigation. We also, we'll pull up that carpeting. We have air conditioners that's available. Like I said, we remove the lead because there's environmental impacts, which we didn't talk about. There's environmental impacts as well. And, really what's the root cause of all of this, right? It's poverty, right? That is the elephant in the room, right? And so that's a larger issue because now we're going to start talking about inequities, disparities, segregation. But going back to community resources, the city of Peoria has housing programs as well. PCCEO has housing programs. So there are METEC has, so there's resources out here. So again, my opinion is that the onus is on us instead of that family to, because you can post, and now we're talking equity, because you can post something on the website and say, well, it's on the website, just go on there and do it, or just download the application and do it. But if you don't have a computer, if you don't really know how to read or write, more than likely, or even know how to speak up and advocate for yourself, more than likely you won't take advantage of these resources. So the more we build these relationships with members of our communities, the more their status is our priority and where we can help. I think we can really start moving that needle on that. So that's just my opinion. I mean, it's really time to get real, right? We can sit high level and say, program planning, but at the end of the day, are we in that house? And that's literally where we need to be. So, so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I don't think it's an opinion. I think it's pretty well documented. So it's poverty, segregation, inequities are contributing to all this. Chief Boone, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I had actually spoke to a group of college students from Chicago. Um, it was about a month ago, and the topic of conversation was gun violence. And they wanted to talk about, their violence in Chicago and stuff like that. And I told them we're not going to go over stats. We're not going to talk about who shot who. I'm going to give you guys the root cause and literally talk to them about redlining. And showed them there was a book. If anybody's never read it, The Color of Law is amazing. Read this book. Probably read it 3 times. I know Coach Booth know what I'm talking about. We kind of went through it. Peter Kovac did an excellent presentation on it. But you could literally see in the city of Peoria, there were redlined areas that were deemed hazardous and literally created systemic poverty areas. And when you look from the 60s and 70s to now, those are the exact areas that you have your high crime and your high violence and your high trauma. So when I spoke to them about it, I said, go to your own cities, look at these covenants, look at these racial covenants where they said that Black people can't live here. Black people couldn't transfer wealth. So if I had a house in this area and I wanted to move out, I couldn't sell this house at a higher value. I'm stuck there. And it's literally created pockets of poverty and violence. And then you throw over policing on top of that, which created trauma in those areas. I said, that's the root cause work that you need to do before you start talking about gun violence and bringing up stats. So when you start going into those homes, like Dr. McKnight was saying, and start putting those wraparound centers in those high poverty areas and being able to say, hey, this is how we help lift the family out so that we're not just saying, okay, you have the flu, but I'm just going to help wipe your nose and that's going to fix it. We have to go, what gave us the flu, and head to that. And that conversation with those college students, I mean, when they left there, they said, we thought we were going to hear something totally different. I said, no, we talk about this same thing over and over again. We talk about these symptoms and not the cause. So, and I've worked with many people on this panel, trying to go to that cause, that root cause work. And Allison has been very instrumental. I've sat at houses with Allison where there were students at, a specific school that were acting out. And Allison said, hey, just come to this house with me. And we sat on this woman's porch, talking about just her poverty and just how she was stuck. And it all made sense as to why the students were acting a certain way in that building. And I was able to give that information to the officer. And as soon as we started addressing those root cause issues, you literally saw a shift in that attitude and that movement instead of us just being punitive with it. So, Allison, that was a wonderful segue and a question and to put that out there. We just have to do that root cause work.
Thank you for sharing that, Chief Boone. Mr. Burnside, and then Mr. Booth.
Thank
I
you.
was just trying to use the clapping emoji. I don't have a hand up.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Just briefly, I would like to try to talk about some of what I'm hearing related to the youth. And this is pretty much why we do a lot of the youth grief support groups. And I also go back to another panel that I sat on. We talked about the youth disconnect with parents and the children. It's because they're having issues dealing with what's going on with the children because there's been some unaddressed trauma, generational type trauma that's been going on with them. They were yet to get any type of assistance or any type of recourse for those issues or get any kind of resolution. So that's kind of why the youth, in the huge disconnect with the parents is because generational trauma is yet to be addressed in many homes.
Yeah.
Janice, I was just going to reply back to everyone real quick. Thank you so much for getting to the root, talking about the elephant in the room. This is the type of conversations that need to continuously be had instead of just leaving the elephant unheard, unseen, those conversations get nowhere and they really help the youth when people actually validate the truth that's happening around us. And how I start with my clients is getting to their basic needs first, because I can't even help them with the mental health counseling until their basic needs are met. So for everyone, thank you for what you do every single day, because they allow me to help get my kids to even get the mental health counseling that they need.
So I can't remember what I was watching. It was about 2 days ago. And I think it was something from the 70s, actually. And it said that the black male child has lost the game before he even started. And it just like slapped me. You know, the black male babies lost the game before they even got started. Like, that's something to really think about, right? And from a systemic perspective, but it also gives you some insight on the struggle of young Black men and what they're faced with, right? And the tools that they have to deal with what's going on in their environment and in their home. So, you know, if we're gonna, like Allison said, like, we need to start putting these types of conversations on the forefront. And if we have to bring good trouble, as they say, you know, for progress and awareness, and then eventually resources, because Terry needs some money. Like, we need, this is by any means necessary at this point, because the trends are going in the wrong direction, particularly for young Black males.
Yeah, I think we're getting to see the shape of the elephant here, for sure. I mean, Demario, that's a really good book. I've recommended it to a lot of people. And the previous director of economic development in Peoria, Ross Black, gives a presentation on redlining with all the data and maps and evolution of how it happened. And believe it or not, those areas were white when they started, and they were banks used metrics, you know, whether you were near a railroad track or a waste dump, or just whether you're data to decide whether they were going to give loans to builders to build homes and people to buy homes and businesses. And we're living with the geography to this day.
And the poverty, because we could not transfer wealth. You know, my great grandparents didn't have the wealth that white counterparts had. They couldn't transfer that wealth down to generations, you know, and so we're stuck. And then we can't keep asking the question of why the crime and the poverty is happening in a certain area over and over again. That's that root cause work.
Right. And the end of that book is not real hopeful. Unfortunately, it's a lot of, gee, we could do these things, but nobody's going to ever agree to it. So we're patching, like you said, we're putting patches on problems that were created decades ago.
So Dr. Zagardo, when I was at the city, I worked in neighborhood development. So Peoria has like over 100 active neighborhood associations throughout the entire city. So it's just not one, you know, area. And there's so many, and I'm going to say white professionals that have roots on the South Side. I talk with them and they talk of, you know, Manual, they claim Woodruff, they claim Central. I mean, and these are like professional, affluent business people. And yes, we have these private conversations and they show this South Side love, but, you know, publicly it's like, where are you at? I would love to get to the point where we can get those people that have roots on the South Side, that may have moved north, that may have, you know, they're affluent now in their families, to come back to their neighborhoods and just bring it back. Like, let's bring it back to those memories that you have, because the South Side, particularly, in my opinion, is the heart of Peoria. Like, that's our roots, that's our legacy is there. And I mean, geographically, you know, we expanded, we annexed north, but that is the core. So that's the heart of our city. So I'm hoping that we can all start seeing that area as that versus, you know, just seeing the upstream issues, right? And just trying to deal with it on the surface level.
Yeah, thanks for putting that into context. I see Katie Wright, but could you maybe introduce yourself? You have a question, and if possible, turn on your camera so we can see who you are.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. I just got a new computer too, and I can't figure it out. Kelsey Wright. I'm a community member here, and am chomping at the bit all the time trying to figure out how in the world I can help. This SNET group I am so excited for, and I know that it's a lot of work and a lot of moving pieces, and we want it to be perfect. But I'm hopeful that it gets out there, that that we can start talking about it, and even if it isn't perfect, we perfect it along the way. Because I do feel that it's one person at a time, right? That you are impacting is the best way of doing it. I want to know that I am supposed to send this person to Terry Burnside, that I can drive someone over to Derek Booth or whatever, because we do have so many amazing resources, so many great community organizations that are doing the same thing. And in some ways it's good because you're meeting them where they are, right? So if this one organization is closer to where they live, way more convenient to get to them rather than being on the other side of the community. So where are we at with that? Is there a point where it is going to be unleashed to all of us to be able to be advocates and boots on the ground and spreading the word?
Thank you, Kelsey. I'm going to let the director of each of these programs discuss what their response is to how community members can help, because I think they're almost all seeking volunteers and kind of coordination with for their programs. So who does any one of the four of you want to start? Mr. Burnside did already tell us a little bit about what he needs, but feel free to repeat that to be more specific.
Just the community collaboration, just to help out, volunteering. Like I said, we have a food pantry, we have a donation room, mentors. We actually start up a GED program real soon, and we'll be introducing another program in here. I just received a call this morning from the Chicago BAM director, and I had a meeting with them a couple of weeks ago with the actual founder of BAM and WOW program. And as a partnership, we just was invited this morning, and I'll collaborate with maybe Mr. Booth and Mr. Boone and Dish 150 and see if we can get some students to go to Chicago. They're going to provide transportation and meals to get these students to see some other stuff. So we may need some volunteers, maybe help a little with that, chaperone, however, just to maybe some escorts or something.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to think of the best way. I mean, Kelsey, I think all of their the names of their affiliations are in the flyer. I'm not sure how you found out about our town hall, but you can contact us or contact them through their affiliated organizations. Does anybody else? Mr. Booth talked a little bit about some of the volunteer opportunities. Transportation, I know, was one of your big ones, right?
Yeah, transportation is a big barrier for many of the individuals that utilize services here at the Wraparound Center, especially on Food Pantry Day. You see them walking from blocks and blocks away with carts and shopping carts and things like that. You see, the nearest bus stop is about a block away on Laramie. It's not a big issue when the weather's warm, but when you're dragging, your resources in the snow, it becomes a challenge. So transportation is a big one. And so one of the things, and then also Pam Wiley, who runs the food pantry that I talked about, she's always looking for volunteers, especially on her distribution days. But she has semis pull up, Mondays and Tuesdays to offload a lot of the food that she gives away. And she gives away great food. It's not just ramen noodles and canned goods. I mean, the best cakes and pies that you can imagine, ribs and beef and fish and shrimp, and she sends them away pretty good. So, but she's always looking for volunteers, and we're also trying to partner with different organizations where if one organization takes 1 week, another organization can help another week, just to kind of spread the wealth, because this is a lot of work and individuals do get burned out. But those are definitely some of the areas that will be beneficial.
And I
Okay.
want,
Oh, go
oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I just
Dr.
want to
McKnight.
add, to Ms. Wright, like food insecurity is like the #1 social determinant of health. And COVID really shed a light on that. There's so many families that don't even think about eating until they get hungry. And like, there's nothing in the freezer, nothing in the refrigerator. And when you're isolated for like 10 days, it's a problem. A lot of our food pantries, they get food from the food banks, and a lot of those foods are packaged and canned. So there is a demand for fresh produce. So that's something like if you want to help out, like right now, food pantries can always use, fruits and vegetables as well for distribution.
Thank you. Good point. And it all boils down to dollars. So if you can't volunteer your time, you can always volunteer your nickels and dimes and pennies and dollars. They're the easiest things to use, the resources. And I think that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this town halls. We know it's a collective issue that resources for families and youth. I mean, it's going to help contribute to a safer environment. So that's pretty much the reason we wanted to put these, a panel together that could talk about these resources, in the hopes that the people that come and watch this video, either on Zoom or participate today, can share these opportunities to help with members of the community who ask them. We've got friends who are friends and community members who are always asking us, what can we do to help? And now we have some very focused ideas, and we hope you all can share these ideas with your friends and community members. So you're going to be our ambassadors coming out of this Zoom meeting to go spread this information around the community. And we only have a few minutes left here. So I think I'm going to give the last word to our fabulous moderator, Shalandra Birch, who rose to the occasion to get all the questions organized and get all the bios of the panelists together. I think she did a fantastic job, and I want to thank her and give her, I think I see her hand up, but I lost her. Let her have the last word here before we adjourn for the evening. So Shalandra, did you disappear?
I'm still here. I had to switch computers at the last minute. My computer decided to update at all times now. But anyway, I wanted to mention something. When Dr. McKnight mentioned the fresh produce, that other communities, and I'm not sure why we don't do this here in Peoria, but other communities in Illinois, the Illinois Department of Corrections, they get seeds donated from other states. And the individuals in custody plant gardens, and they have fresh produce. And they keep some of that produce, of course, for themselves, but some of that produce they donate to other communities. And I don't know why we don't do that here, but that is something that we could consider for Peoria community to try to get some fresh produce if they have room to donate to us in the Peoria community. And I work at the Illinois Department of Corrections in programming and doing those kind of programming. So if we connect with the right people, I'm willing to figure out why we don't have that in Peoria and how we could maybe get that in Peoria, the donations, if they have some left for our community.
That's a great idea, Shalandra. So we've turned this into a brainstorming session also. So I really appreciate the programs that you all administer to our community, and encourage everyone to donate their time and dollars if they have them to support these programs, and tell everybody that these programs are in existence, to go get help, stop with the stigma. It's really on all of us to support our friends and not stigmatize community members, and to offer our help where possible. So I don't see any more hands up. We're right on schedule here. So I want to thank everybody for participating. and take all this good news back to your community and your neighbors and ask them to lend a hand every now and then. It's not all the time, it's just every now and then. As my mother used to say, many hands make light work. So let's get involved and help out a little bit. So thank you to everyone. Good night.
Thank you to everyone.